Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to this week's lesson on the YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about arpeggios, and specifically how to craft arpeggios that are a little more outside of the norm. I'm not talking about triadic arpeggios or seventh arpeggios. I'm really talking more so about arpeggios that are a little more harmonically complex or a little more ambiguous, and stuff that can expand your tonal palette a little bit. Now, this isn't to say that they're going to be a complete, there's a complete, what do you want to call it? A complete rejection of kind of regular arpeggios. There's so much you can do with just basic triads, and I really regard that as a foundational step in just learning how to navigate the instrument. But, yeah, I had some people asking about this, and a topic that some people would be interested in seeing, so I figured why not tackle it. As always, if you have any topic suggestions, just comment something below or shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook or shoot me an email. I'll happily answer. So let's get into it. Now, when I think of these arpeggios, I think of two directions I could go in, and we're going to talk about both of them to some degree. The first being shape-based, or we'll regard shapes as the second, and the first one being intervallic relationships, and looking at the intervallic structure. Now, as a preface to this, let's kind of break down what is an arpeggio. I think some people might have seen, like, okay, it's essentially the notes of a chord played separately, which is true to an extent, but our conventional description of an arpeggio usually revolves around mostly or third-based movement if it's triadic, or something with a seventh in there, but still being mostly third-based. So really do consider that. Now, why am I starting with this? I want to zoom out of that. Understand this view from a more macro perspective, if you would. We're going to keep the idea or the general rule that there should be quite a few jumps, and in the case of if we're using like a seventh thing, we can use maybe one or two whole step or half step movements in there. To me, a lot of the more creative arpeggio work, or at least when I mean more creative, I mean more harmonically adventurous. The more harmonically adventurous creative work yields more harmonically complex results. So let's start simple first of all. Let's take maybe a structure we're familiar with but is not used so much. What about a sus2? Right? So I've got G, A, and D. We can take this in multiple octaves. Or if you want, you can use your right hand if you want to get a more fluid sound. I really encourage people to think about sound when playing a lot of this stuff, by the way. So that already gives us a sound we can work with. You can do the same thing with sus4. Right? However, what if we branched out a little bit? This is where things start to get a little more creative. What if we do, instead of going, we're going to keep the interval structure for now, second and fourth. And there's another fourth there, but we're going to ignore that for now. We're just going to keep this basic structure, but move it through the key. I'm going to do it in the key of C. So we've got C, D, F. Maybe I want to start here. And then we can go... That's kind of a cool, like, that's, what sound is that? It's kind of like a good Ionian sound, actually. If I take, like, or like a C major kind of with an F in there. Don't do this all the time. Like that kind of sound. you see, like, I was playing around with the order as well. You can do that as well, and that yields some interesting results. And it's kind of vertical so far. What if I changed the second starting point? So if I treat this as the first, what if I went to A instead? Or now I'm opening up the intervals a little more and playing around with it. You might see that, like, this is heavily 2-1-2 based. For me, this can apply to any, it doesn't matter if it's 2-1-2, 3-1-3, it's just how do you get the idea out? Play around with a shape. So for example, if I do 1-2-3-5, I can take that in octaves and treat it almost like an arpeggio. Or I can take that that's a different sound in and of itself. Or I can take and open up the structure slowly. Like, you can take these ideas and start messing around with them, and what you end up with as you speed these ideas up is you end up with a sort of sheets of sound aesthetic. And I think there's a Chick Corea video of him talking about this, floating about. I think it's a video of him with Marcus Gilmore and Carlitos del Puerto. They're all sat around a piano, and I think they're just talking about music. And Chick was talking about Coltrane and how this is kind of what Coltrane was aiming for, in the sense, like, obviously, like, a horn cannot play chords, so what what Coltrane would do is take basically piano structures or harmonic structures, chords, and just arpeggiate them, and get this huge range, harmonically speaking. And we'll dive into that a little bit as we start messing around with some of this stuff. So that's kind of the shape or the intervallic nature in a nutshell. You can expand this out. You don't just have to stick to, like, really small intervals. You can branch this out to maybe, I don't know, fourths, fifths, sixths, even sevenths. So for example, like that, I've got fifth, I've got a minor third interval there, fifth, and then a fourth at the end. That's a nice open sound. But what if I started getting a little more adventurous? Like, that's a cool sound. That's like a D7 sus with a flat 9. If I wanted to include that, I can add that in the arpeggio, so to speak. That's a cool sound. And one thing I will say is the more notes you add to an arpeggio like this, and without it sounding like a scale, that is, the more information you add to this, the more harmonically complex the chord becomes, and the more independent you can be with the harmony, or the more descriptive it becomes, I think is a better way of describing it. You can accurately portray harmonic information in a linear sense with just one of these arpeggios, because there's so much information inside that. However, you can also go the open route, right? You can go the open route and just keep it quite loose, and that has a different color to it that's a little more ambiguous, a little more odd or ethereal, because there isn't as much information in there. So what if I started messing around with this even more? I could start maybe including sixth intervals, or I'm going to do it down up here. So I got a minor sixth there. It's actually a spread triad. Same sound. Right? So I've got like a... And I use these a lot as connecting ideas. You can play them up and down. Or you can connect them to maybe, let's say, another more harmonically complex arpeggio. Right? Or play around with the contour a little bit. At the end of the day, what this will do is it'll start opening up your ears a little bit. Now let's dive into the second path being the shape-based path. And this is kind of one of the rare moments I'll tell guitar players and also just say on this channel that use the instrument to your advantage. I mean, I say that a bunch to begin with, but more in the sense of, just visualize some shapes and see what happens. Normally, I'm a huge proponent of someone really understanding their instrument, understanding it inside out, really putting in the time to be able to visualize and understand what it is you're working with and understand the intricacies and the relationships that are here on this instrument, much like a piano or a horn player would. But we do have an advantage in that shapes are very easy to find. You can play a shape and a sound will come out of the instrument. So for example, let's say I'm sticking with this shape, kind of the fifth shape, right? And the rule is I cannot break the shape, right? So I can do, right? That's actually, it's an odd sound. I kind of like it. I think if you use it musically, it's valid. Or, that's actually kind of cool. That gets you like a good kind of mixolydian sound, or like a good major with the 11 in there. Right? That's a sound that's really beautiful. And I wouldn't have normally played that. Actually, like, really speaking for myself here, I wouldn't have normally played that if I hadn't thought of just the shape, right? So what I recommend is use the shapes, and if you get lucky and it sounds good, that's awesome. Otherwise, what you can do is you can start tweaking it. Use the shape as a starting point. So for example, I think in the intro I played, or that somewhere in the, it was actually one I just found before recording this video. I was just messing around with the concepts, so I can actually sound like I know what I'm talking about, but messing around with the idea so I could kind of get some clarity on it, and I found that shape. And what was my thought process? Let's reverse engineer it. I thought, okay, this is my shape. Now what if I just move this around? That's actually kind of cool. I like that. But what if I tweaked the... Actually, you can even play it like this. And this is the thing. So when you start with a shape, then you see, okay, I like that, but it's a little clunky, technically speaking. Is there a way for me to play it? That's kind of cool. I actually really like that. I should use that more. It's kind of out in a good way. And then what I would do is I would start tweaking notes here and there. So I'm like, okay, I like this portion. But what if instead of hitting the high D sharp, I hit a high D, right? That's a really nice tense structure. I don't know, I really love how that starts pulling your attention. Right? That's a cool, very cool structure in and of itself. What if I start tweaking the notes even more? Not a fan of that. That's cool. Or what if I combine multiple structures? So I'm using this, this. That's cool. What if I change the order? Right? The bottom line is, and I hope I've kind of made my point clear with this, in that I'm purely thinking of a shape, right? I'm purely thinking of a shape and not really ascribing anything to it. Because what I find this does is it puts me in a different thought process and gets me to essentially the same end result, but somewhere totally different than my ear would have normally been drawn to, or where maybe, let's say, the theoretical mind or the harmonically inclined mind would normally go. So what I would do is, or what I would suggest is, play around with the shape-based idea, but then reverse engineer it and figure out, okay, what is actually happening here? So that then this can become a piece of applicable musical information, as opposed to maybe just something you throw out for color or because it just sounds cool. That's a great motivator. Like, if it sounds incredible to you, that's a great motivator to use it. But you really have to understand how it works so that you can use it with musical freedom and be able to connect ideas to it. At the end of the day, we are talking about improvisation. That said, this stuff is really great to start, even if you want to look at compositional ideas. So maybe you want to, I don't know, maybe you want to try extend, let's say, I don't know, you're dealing with some overlapping parts and you kind of want this tessellated effect. So maybe you could have, I don't know, low strings begin to arpeggiate the first three notes of the chord, then have, I don't know, low strings arpeggiate the first three notes, then violas, then violins, take everything after that. You could do the same with winds or singers, you know? Like, let's say you'll have your bassists, sorry, arpeggiate two notes, then you'll go to your tenors, then you'll do this, and you kind of end up with this bell-like structure, but it allows you to really form these larger voicings and think of it in a melodic content. So this information is just great, not just as an improviser, but also as a composer. So I hope this lesson was useful for you guys and got you thinking about some new ideas. If you find this is helping you guys, please always tag me on stuff on Instagram if you've been working with it and it's helped you and you want to share your progress. I'd love to see what you guys are doing. As always, if you do enjoy the stuff on this channel, please do like, comment, subscribe, share the video with anyone you think might be interested. It always helps this channel grow and inspires me to keep sharing more information and just making more lesson content and just uploading, more actual music and creative pursuits. So take care, and I will see you in the next video.